Okay, okay, I'm going to let you all go. Thank you so much. Reverend Thurston, how are you? Hallelujah. Thank you for the YouTube link. Thank you. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Will you have any time for a quick chat today? Okay, I need to. Okay, it'll be kind of when I get off the air because I've got to roll into a few meetings. So I do need to chat with you real quick. How are your parents doing? Good. Well, honey, they got a check now. Praise the Lord. Oh, had a nice chat with Claudette. We got to plan out our going to finding a restaurant where we can go get something to eat, like you and I did. It will be RPM or Gibson's or something like that. Where you can't look. That's our spot. So every time we go to Gibson's, we get a whole dinner for her dad. Oh boy. Oh yes. And Faith. I cannot believe they're both gone. Oh boy, oh boy. Oh, was that wonderful? Oh my. Oh, it was a great flashback. Seeing him chew on that tongue, I just thought I was going to holler. Oh my gosh. Oh, but we're up on StreamYard now, and I have to have an equipment change, Reverend Thurston, um, so that I can come up. But we're about to go onto a bigger platform than that, so I have to wait before I get anything else. But this is hello everybody. How you doing? It's great to be with you. I've got Reverend Stephen Thurston to give us some good news. Of course, Dr. Deborah Holden will be talking to us about COVID-19. This is it's an evolving story, right? So we're going to be talking about that and what you still need to do to protect yourself, as we did indeed yesterday officially pass the 500,000 person mark. Um, for deaths in the United States. We're 4% of the world's population and 20% now of the deaths. The numbers are just far too great. We're going to be talking about that. But today, you know what, Reverend Thurston, we're going to talk about this stunning letter that was revealed yesterday by the family of Malcolm X and Attorney Benjamin Crump. The letter from an NYPD police officer who just died last year, Ray Wood, who said that he was an informant for the NYPD and that he was recruited to to conspire to kill Malcolm X, which they did do. And he, in his letter, says that it was the NYPD in collusion with the FBI. And so I just think it's something we talk about today. So everybody, please like and share. And we're sending our love to Kenneth Rush today, one of our morning stars. Yes? Were you going to say something? Okay, thank you. Um, he has been under the weather, and you know what? We're praying for him and waiting for him to come on back because we miss you, Kenneth. We miss you. But I think it's important for us to talk about that. And of course, we'll be talking about the latest. We're going to talk about that for an hour, but then we're going to be talking about the latest in politics with John Nichols from The Nation. Because, Reverend Thurston, you've got Merrick Garland, who was denied a hearing by the Senate after President Obama nominated him to the Supreme Court. Now he could become the Attorney General, and it appears the votes are there. But Neera Tanden, who has become a lightning rod for Republicans and for progressive Democrats. She's been a very, very popular centrist. She's been head of the left-leaning Center for American Progress think tank. But she's a very, very spirited woman, I'll put it that way. And she's had these very spirited tweets, many of which she's eliminated because, when you're trying to get in office, Reverend, you kind of have to calm things down. And she's a feisty one, and boy, I mean, she and uh, we have about 30 seconds. Yes. Hello. Hello. We have about 30 seconds. Well, 20. How much do we have? 15? Okay, very good. So because even while all this stuff is ongoing, the business of government is ongoing. So stay right there, Reverend Thurston. I'm so glad you're with us. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. I'm coming to you from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, indeed, the premier talk radio station for progressive politics in the nation, WCPT, and of course, our brethren, sister to the north, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Rise and shine, rise and shine. I'm so glad to be with you today. What a blessing. Call and text us at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. So please don't miss the odd opportunity. And join us over here on these multiple platforms: Facebook, the Santita Jackson and Friends page. You can meet my morning stars there, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page, and the Santita Jackson landing page. Now, if you want to become my friend, I need you to go to Santita Jackson and Friends, because the Santita Jackson page was the original page. You top out at 5,000 friends. I topped out a long time ago. So please become my friend on Santita Jackson and Friends. And we are also on YouTube. So I want all of you, I'm getting some feedback, Dylan. I need you to bring that down. Okay. I want you to meet me on YouTube, the Santita Jackson Show. The Santita Jackson Show. So please like and subscribe. Still getting feedback, Dylan. So let's calm that, whatever we need to do to calm that down. And then, of course, you can meet me on LinkedIn. You can meet me all over the place. So please like and subscribe on the Santita Jackson Show. I have a new Twitter feed, which is uh, at the Santita J Show. Of course, I'm also still at Santita J. So meet me, and let's get right to it. We're sending all of our love to our morning star, Kenneth Rush, who has been under the weather. We're sending him much love. Can't wait for him to get back and to tell us how he is doing and how he's been faring. Sending you much love, Kenneth. You know we love you and we've missed you, but wondering where you were. But okay, all right. Are you right there, Kenneth? Happy Civil Rights Leaders Day. Love you, sweetie. Hope you're doing okay. Keep in touch with us and let us know how you are doing. Medi just came out of from under our doctor's care as well. Maria, one of the three amigas. So we just send her much love too. But everybody's with us today, and we feel so blessed to have you. Dedicating the show to two of my favorite people. You might not know their names, but these are, in this Black History Month, African Americans who've really broken on through. In Washington, D.C., you've had an entrepreneurial class in the African American community that's very, very new. But this woman out of South Carolina, Liz Nolan, was the queen of beauty. She was one of the few people to have been trained, one of the last persons to have been trained by Vidal Sassoon. She and John Atchison, two African Americans, by the way. And she bought a lot of real estate in New York, in DC. And if you wanted to get your hair done by the best person in that town, you went to Liz Nolan. And she made her transition. Multi-millionaire businesswoman, gave so many a leg up and a way up and a way out. And we thank God for her life and legacy. Sending you much love up in heaven, Miss Nolan. And Douglas Turner Ward. When African Americans could not get opportunities in theater, he opened the door, the Negro Ensemble Theater. All of the greats in theater and movies of the past 60, 70 years went through the Negro Ensemble Theater. And so we thank God for his life and legacy. 90 years of age he was. We're going to be talking about the Malcolm X revelations today on the Santita Jackson Show. What did this NYPD police officer, what did he reveal? What did he reveal? He said the FBI and the NYPD colluded to kill Malcolm X. Got to talk about that today with this wonderful panel we have. And, of course, we will have John Nichols. And the good news with Reverend Stephen Thurston. And, of course, COVID-19 update with the brilliant Reverend Dr. Deborah Holden. All right, everybody, let's get right to it. The U.S. coronavirus death toll officially passed 500,000 yesterday. According to this Guardian report, 500,000 people have now died from COVID-19 in the United States just over a year after the country detected its first cases of a virus. We are 4% of the world's population, 20% of the deaths, everybody. They reached 500,000, these deaths, on Monday, according to data from the Johns Hopkins University. More than 28 million people have been tested positive for this virus. We are the worst in the world, and the pandemic has thrown a harsh spotlight on our country's ability to cope with such a disaster, everybody. Americans may still need masks to fight COVID 19 even into 2022, according to Dr. Anthony Fauci. In the wake of that news, COVID in the United States has left 4 million family members grieving, everybody. It's a tidal wave, according to this report from The Guardian. A tidal wave of grief resulting from the COVID 19 pandemic has now swept up 4 million Americans. It's an incalculable loss because it wasn't just a half a million people who died, they had family members, they had loved ones. 3,448 frontline workers, everybody, have died in this pandemic. 32% of them have been nurses. 19% have been healthcare support. 17% have been physicians. 8% have been medical first responders, administrators, and administration support. 6% diagnosing clinicians. 4% healthcare technologists. It has just been social workers. 3% cleaners. It's been devastating, everybody. And indeed, we're going to continue. That's why we continue to talk about this every day, because we want to give you the best information so that you can get well or be well, everybody. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, former chief of the FDA, said that an estimate for herd immunity by April might be too aggressive, but he says that's in the right direction. Good news, everybody. And there's an analysis that shows that the U.S. can help vaccinate the world for $25 billion. The President Biden pledged just $2 billion at a G7 meeting. Despite this new public citizen analysis showing that a $25 billion investment in coronavirus by the U.S. government would ensure everyone on the planet is inoculated in a timely fashion, the Biden administration only pledged $2 billion in additional support. Wonder why that is. Maybe, do we have the money? We're functioning at a record deficit, everybody. Think about that. In the meantime, President Biden's job approvals and the national economy, he's got some great approval ratings, everybody. He's approved of, he has a high approval rating from 58% of Americans. Wow. 34% say they disapprove, but those numbers are quite high, quite high. So Merrick Garland had quite the day yesterday. It looks like he has the votes to become the Attorney General, but he's going to continue on with these hearings. And he says that the Capitol riot investigation will be his top priority, everybody. So we will see if he gets through. In the meantime, Neera Tanden, who's been nominated to head up the Office of Management and Budget, she's having a hard time. She's viewed as a centrist, corporatist Democrat by progressives, and Republicans are pushing back on her as well. It seems that she might not have the votes, but we will have to see. This is unacceptable. This is the headline from Common Dreams. Progressives reject West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin's proposal to cut the $15 minimum wage proposal to $11. Now, mind you, that is the minimum wage in West Virginia, $11 an hour. What do you think about that? Does it need to be $15, or should it be more than $20? Because in fact, according to economists, if our minimum wage kept up with the cost of living, it would be above $23. What about the gentleman whose light stayed on during the storm and now he owes $16,752? Scott Willoughby, 63-year-old Army veteran who lives on Social Security payments. He said he had nearly emptied his savings account so he would be able to pay this bill charged to his credit card, 70 times what he usually pays for his utilities. In the meantime, the demands are growing for Texas to forgive all utility bills, everybody, for price gouging, because it's not the fault of the consumers that these electricity companies, the utility companies, refused to winterize. Reverend Stephen Thurston, preaching machine from the House of Hope, Salem Baptist Church. Love it, love it, love it. Author of the book, Mirror Moments. Everybody take a look at yourself. How about that? Everybody like and share, like and share. Take a look at yourself. Something that I love to do. That's right, because of course it's never my fault. Like, what is that? No, it's not me. It's you. It's you. It's you. It's you. Oh boy, give me some good news today. Ooh.
Badly of us, there's a problem. Because we think that if there's nothing for other people to criticize us about, then everyone is going to appreciate us. And that's still a lie. You can get everything right, and there's somebody that's going to find fault. I often look at YouTube videos, and they could be amazing. It could have 1 million likes, and it's like there's always one person who hits the thumbs down button. And I find out who this one person is who goes around and just hits thumbs down on whatever it is that's posted on YouTube. Listen, the closer I am to perfection, the less they'll have to critique is the mindset. And that's just not the truth. And what we fail to recognize is that this need to appear perfect sets us up to be at the mercy of other people's opinions. I often say that validation is not for people, it's for parking. And I need for us to get that locked into our mindset. Because our self-worth becomes based on what others think of us. So we then try to control these perceptions. And if you're a perfectionist, you probably grew up being valued for your performance rather than your character. That's another conversation for another time, but I want people to understand the source and not just the symptom. As you were growing up, you probably didn't experience unconditional love. So you equate acceptance with performance. You learned to believe that others only see worth in you because of what you accomplish. And now that you're an adult, you still see yourself in the same way, with your self-worth being a product of other people's opinions. And let me warn you that perfectionism is going to rob you of the richness that life ultimately has to offer. It can get in the way of our success because we'll never feel satisfied about our performance because we can never reach perfection. And after a while, you won't even be able to relax and enjoy life as it is. So somebody said, okay, Stephen, I got it. You got me. I'm a perfectionist. I'm always shooting for straight A's. So what can I do about this? Great question. Glad you asked. Let me give you a few things that I want for us to consider. Number one, we've got to recognize the danger and the damage that perfectionism has inflicted in our life. It's caused us to miss the moment, not live in the moment, not appreciate everything that God has allowed us to do and accomplish, the impact that we've made on people's lives, even if we didn't score 100 on what we were seeking to do. Second thing I want us to consider is that we need to challenge our thinking. So every time we pursue the perfectionist path, we need to ask ourselves, number one, why am I doing this? Number two, what good will this really do for me? Number three, what damage will this cause me in the long run? Third question, we've got to ask ourselves, what's the worst that can happen if I'm not perfect in doing this? Number fourth thing to consider is that we accept the value in making mistakes. Mistakes are really how we learn and grow. Mistakes actually happen more than success happens. So we need to appreciate and value the mistakes we make in life. And if you're not making mistakes, you really aren't doing anything. You're not trying anything. You're not stretching yourself. You're not growing. And then the fifth thing to consider is to change your standard. This may sound crazy, and I know if I've got some educators on here, they may push back on this one, but I want people to stop shooting for 100. Go for like 85, and because it's more likely to achieve, and the results will still be excellent. So whenever we try to appear perfect to people, we're ensuring that those relationships won't be healthy because they're based on lies, contrived images that we've developed. So here it is. What if you spent your time striving for an A and being your authentic self? and not a picturesque presentation that you hope everybody else will approve of. My challenge for us today is to give up on shooting for straight A's and recognize that there's value in making mistakes.
Wow. There's value in making mistakes. Everybody, there is value in making mistakes all day long. All day long. Thank you for that, because that's hard. That's a hard one, Reverend. That's a hard one.
Yes,
Because
it
I
is.
know
It is.
I based my whole self image was based upon
Yes,
being a straight A student and being a
yes,
good girl for my parents. And you talk
yes.
about running into a buzzsaw when I got to college. Because number one, I was majoring in something that was completely wrong for me. I hated it, and I was really struggling. And I struggled, and I never forgave myself for not being perfect for other
Yeah,
people. And it took me a long time to get up out of that. Just it took me a
yeah.
long time. It took me a long time. It took me a long time. And so I want to thank you for that, because that is something I know. Um, we all need that. We all need to engage in some self forgiveness. So stay right here. I've got Dr.
Yes.
Deborah Fur Holden on with us. She's given us a quick word today about COVID-19, and I know that's something you're dealing with in your church at Salem Baptist Church, the House of Hope. COVID-19 has disproportionately impacted African Americans, but it's impacted Americans disproportionately. White, black, yellow, red, everybody. With 4% of the world's
Everybody.
population, 20% of the deaths. 20% of the deaths, Dr. Deborah Verholden. We reached a landmark that you said that we would reach if we did not mitigate this virus in a particular way. More than 500,000 Americans have died as of yesterday, according to Johns Hopkins, your alma mater. What do you say?
Well, it's not a great day for us, but we are going in the right direction, And so I just keep reminding people, if they want to come out of this, everybody's got to do their part. The government has to do their part. Individuals have to do their part. We don't have to have gotten this far, but the fact that we have gotten this far and things are moving in the right direction, I just want people to stay the course. And my concern is summertime's coming. I'm in Michigan. My uncle asks me every day that I talk to him, is it snowing there? I said, Unc, it's Michigan. Once it starts snowing, it's just snowing until, you
Stop.
oh
But
my God.
do you think that would we? Because we've been told by credible people that herd immunity could be achieved by April. Now, we've just been told something else, that no, directionally that's true, but herd immunity by April, not gonna happen. What will that mean for the summer? Because you know what, many of us, we're a year in. Last summer it was still kind of new. Now I know, I'm putting it right out there. I've got COVID mask fatigue. I have it. I do.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I don't have, people like Reverend Thurston and I, we are loners by nature, so we're okay with all of this. But even at some point, you really do. He and I went out to dinner a few weeks ago. Like, we're gonna do this.
yeah.
We got to go. I can't take anymore, Reverend. Reverend couldn't take anymore. And Dr. Deborah
Yeah.
Verholden, what are we supposed to do? Dr. Fauci said we could have these masks on through next year.
That's possible. And not only that, you might start to see changes in people's behaviors. You might see people wearing masks during flu season,
Yeah.
just because. We avoided a lot of that. And don't get me wrong, this is not the long term solution. The long term answer here can't be that everybody has to mask up and physically distance and all of that, because that's not a life that I think people would find enough joy in to be able to sustain that over the long haul. But at the same time, we should not emerge out of this exactly the same people we came in. People are a lot more mindful now than they were coming into this pandemic. People are much more mindful. If we came out of this and people were more focused on their health, right?
practicing those basic things that promote and increase your own health, boost your own immune system. If people came out of this more mindful about washing their hands, hand washing would prevent the spread of so, so many things. We would be a much healthier country if people would practice better hand hygiene. So there's some things I think that might come out of this that will make us a healthier nation overall. But I don't think it would be good if we have to stay like this with these modified operations and people being indoors and socially and physically distant and wearing masks. I was out the other day, and the funny thing about a mask is you can't really see people. So I was surely out, and a friend of mine was looking me dead in my face. And I said, "Excuse me?" Like, I was offended. Like, you got an eye problem? Picture, it lasts longer. She was doing what she was trying to figure out if it was me or not.
Thank you.
Because it's hard to see, And so, and I'm thinking, why is this, chick staring at me? And so this can't last for long. Like, I don't see us being able to do this at this level for a whole nother year. I just don't think they're already fatigued. I don't think they would honor it for that long. But what we do and how we do emerge out of this, what new health habits we do bring forward, that's a conversation worth having. Because I do believe you're going to see some return to some sense of normalcy by the summertime. And what's that going to look like? And how can we do that in a way that honors what we've all just been through and the fact that we've learned some things about how to better protect our health and the health of the people we care about. So I say let's talk about that instead of the 500,000 deaths. Because honestly, if we hadn't turned things around, we would have been at 500,000 deaths way before now. And I don't believe we're going to get to herd immunity by April. So, I encourage people to just stay the course because I don't think that's going to happen.
Dr. Deborah Furholden, brilliant epidemiologist. She should be on one of these presidential commissions. Reverend Thurston. She ought to be.
Hey, that sounds good to me.
With a brilliant work that she has done in New York and Flint, Michigan, and in Baltimore, Johns Hopkins. We need to hear from her because they've been able to do a lot of mitigation of this virus up in Michigan, thanks to her guidance. And she has a wonderful team, but got to give credit where it's due. We're talking about Malcolm X, FBI, NYPD. According to a police officer who just passed away, he was an informant. He said, we colluded to kill Malcolm X. What do you think about that? Call me, 773-763-WCPT. Back in a minute.
WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Good morning. Good morning.
Would you all like to stick around as we talk about Malcolm X?
This is WCPT.
Can you bring this down just a bit?
Chicago's
I know it's out.
Huh? Okay. And I need you to bring it up just a little bit so I can hear it in the background. I need to make sure we haven't dropped out. Just bring it up just a tinge. Very good. Thank you. You know what? This is a very interesting time. So much.
Chip Gibbons and Dwight McKee is here.
Okay. So much is getting revealed. Reverend Thurston, did you hear about that story?
He dropped.
Oh, okay. Dr. Deborah Furholden, did you hear about that story?
What story?
About there was an NYPD, a New York Police Department informant, who said that he left a deathbed confession. He wrote a letter saying that it was the FBI and the NYPD that colluded to kill Malcolm X.
Did they actually kill him? Because there's a whole story that explains what happened there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and there's a whole lot going on. There's a whole lot to it, but it's just very interesting that this would come out now. And so we've got Chip Gibbons, of course, one of our favorites here. I just told him, I said, I really like you, sir. I love the work that you're doing. I love it. And of course, we got Dr. D, Dwight McKee, mic drop. And of course, attorney Mark Fancher will be joining us at the top of the hour. But we want to talk about this because Chip Gibbons has a podcast, Dr. Deborah Furholden, called Still Spying. We think COINTELPRO ended, and it really didn't. So we're going to come back to that. And let me say hello to Chip and to Dwight this morning. How are you today?
I'm well. How about you?
Good morning. Wonderful hearing you. And of course, you're on with Dr. Deborah Holden. She is one of the world's leading epidemiologists, and she's generous enough to share herself with us every day. And believe it or
Dr.
not,
Deborah.
isn't she great?
Dr. Deborah, such a scholar gangster.
She's a scholar gangster. I love it.
Good morning, Dwight. Good morning.
Did you see how she was about to pull off her earrings and put her Vaseline on her face because someone was staring her down with her? I said, that's interesting. Now, we don't even know who you were going to beat up, Deborah. Who is this chick?
That's how it was where I grew up. We say, you got an eye problem. You got an eye problem.
I said, wait a minute. When she was about to do what? Like, wait, who you looking at? Oh, that was so rich. Oh, I loved it, girl. Now that was one for the ages. I want you to know I had to kind of catch my stomach so I would not crack up on the air. Ooh, I said, ooh, oh my gosh, And girl, look, I grew up in public, so people would do some things where they were really, thank you so much, that were hilarious, and laughing would have been inappropriate. And my brother Jesse could always get me. We were at a meeting with, we were sitting off to the side. Our father was meeting with the president, I think, of Angola. And one of the persons in the meeting, brilliant guy, he had a comb over that started from one ear and went to the next. So I'm sitting there, and my brother puts his arm around me, and I thought he was having a tender moment. No, he pulled my hair out of my bun, and he pulled it over the top of my head, wrapped it around my ear, and stuffed it in my ear. And that was just as the meeting was ending, and I am laughing, I am tearful, and my brother pulled me over. He said, "See, Reverend and Mr. President, she's so moved by Africans and African Americans coming together. She's in tears." I couldn't handle it because this man had the comb over from Hades. It just looked crazy.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Call or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Let's talk about this story. These new claims about the assassination of Malcolm X. Brilliant nationalist Ossie Davis, the great thespian, who also did work with the Negro Ensemble Theater. Thank you, Douglas Turner Ward, as we dedicate the show to him today. He called him our shining black prince. Even though my parents worked for Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, they loved Malcolm X. My father said he gave you, he helped to restore manhood. My mother said he gave us so much strength. And as he was turning a corner and really embracing Orthodox Islam, as he was he was pulling together a rainbow coalition, if you will, he was murdered in front of his wife, who was pregnant with twins, and their 4 babies. Horrific. And Ray Wood, who was a police officer with the New York Police Department, made a deathbed confession as a 2011 letter that he said, "I want it released after my death." And he maintains that he was part of a conspiracy by the NYPD and the FBI to murder Malcolm X, which ultimately happened. So, of course, we have got this tremendous panel. We're going to be joined by Attorney Mark Fancher at the top of the hour. But we've got, of course, Chip Gibbons, Policy Director for Defending Rights and Dissent. And, of course, he is the host of his own podcast, Still Spying. I urge you to get that podcast because it is absolutely brilliant. Dwight McKee, National Action Network, indeed, former Youth Division head for Operation Breadbasket, Operation Push. And these are people, he came up in that era and got to know if he didn't get to meet them personally, he understood the context in which these people lived. So before we get to you, Dwight McKee, I want to ask you, because you are pushing in this space, Chip Gibbons, from Defending Rights and Dissent. What do you make of this story?
Well, sure. It's a very important revelation, and the claim that is made in the letter is that the gentleman who was an undercover officer, he had been acting to sort of entice people within the civil rights movement, civil rights community, to engage in crimes, particularly people in Malcolm X's security detail, in order that they would have a pretense to arrest them, and therefore they could not provide security the day of the assassination. Of course, when we talk about FBI or law enforcement involvement in these types of assassinations, there's two types of potential involvement. One of which is the more active involvement, which is, they carried it out themselves. The other of which is that they sort of deliberately failed to stop it. And when you have a figure like Malcolm X, who is being extremely heavily surveilled by the FBI, and I was pulling up his FBI files in the FBI Vault last night, a website where you can access sort of a number of historical documents. Right, they start surveilling him in the early 50s, and they continue to his death. They're wiretapping his phones, they're going after him, et cetera, things like that. And then the other thing is that the New York Police Department had its own Bureau of Special Services, which was sort of the FBI equivalent, the NYPD equivalent of the FBI, and they were also heavily surveilling Malcolm X. On top of that, there are both FBI and NYPD informants all throughout the Nation of Islam, one of the most heavily surveilled organizations in the history of this country. And you're just sort of left with, well, they're gathering all of this information. If there was an assassination plot, how did they not know about it, and why didn't they stop it? And now you have this claim from a former NYPD officer that they were actively colluding to make it happen by arresting members of his security detail so they could not be on the door that day. And if people doubt that the FBI would, deliberately fail to stop an assassination plot, I mean, the organization I work for traces its founding back to the National Committee to Abolish the House Un-American Activities Committee. Its founder was Frank Wilkinson. He'd been a public housing advocate in Los Angeles. He was working to go on a public housing project in Chavez Ravine. The FBI gave his FBI file to the developers. They drove him out of his job. They built a baseball stadium instead. And when they released his FBI files, one of them in 1964 concerned an alleged assassination plot against him, and the FBI knew about it, did nothing to stop it, and had an agent sitting outside the house where the assassination was supposed to take place, who just notes, well, the assassin never came. So the FBI is undeniably willing not to intervene. We also know, as part of their counterintelligence or COINTELPRO program, they deliberately had a strategy of inciting conflicts between people with the hopes of them becoming violent. And so that's definitely all documented behavior. Whether or not they went the further step is a different question, but there's no doubt that the FBI would gin up sort of a situation in which someone would be inspired or encouraged to kill Malcolm X. And if they had information about it, there's no doubt in my mind they would have failed to intervene.
Dwight McKee, what do you make of this?
Well, I think she covers most ground. The only component I add to it is that it was seemed to have been a relationship between the FBI and the CIA. And one of the things we know about the CIA is that the FBI is assigned to domestic situations, but the CIA really are by mandate only allowed to be involved in international situations. So you have to raise the question, why would Malcolm be such a danger internationally? And The answer to that would be is because he was really organizing uh, relationships in the diaspora. He had gone to Mecca. He was organizing uh, Jews and other religious groups, blacks who were involved in the diaspora, bringing them together, talking about African unity, African American unity, as was Dr. King, who had gone over to Uganda to that ceremony.
In
Uh,
right.
a Kumpa, as Lumumba had gotten killed over there, as they had killed Che, as they were trying to kill Castro, is I think that the biggest danger the big unspoken danger that all of them had in common, because they were all with different religions with different philosophies, was that they were really kind of organizing for the diaspora, and there became a threat to colonialism worldwide. And so it seems to have been a combination of relationship between FBI, CIA, and the local police forces.
Chip Gibbons, Defending Rights and Dissent. Why is this revelation important at this time?
Well, I mean, I think it's always important that we know the truth about what happened. I also know that one of the people who were convicted, so 3 men were ultimately convicted of Malcolm X's killing. 2 maintained their innocence, and the one who did not maintained the other 2 were not involved. I think it was exactly a year ago, this time a year ago, there was a new documentary series exploring the killing of Malcolm X that has led to an attempt by the Innocence Project to overturn the conviction of one of the surviving men who were convicted of this act. And that investigation by the New York prosecutor's office is still ongoing, and we do not know what the results or findings of it will be. So it's extremely timely given that. But also, I don't think we ever really got the full extent of the FBI's involvement in the assassinations in the 60s and just in destroying movements. And it's really important for our democracy that we understand what role our government was willing to play in quashing or destroying political and social movements, which is, in theory, not supposed to be what they're doing. We should be protected by the First Amendment, but we know Bill of Rights doesn't always mean a whole lot to the FBI or the police. And it's also important for our present, right? The FBI still exists. The FBI headquarters is still the J. Edgar Hoover building. And, maybe they're not up to the same sort of covert actions or dirty tricks they were in the 60s. Maybe they are. We do know they are still engaged in surveillance. We do know they're still engaged in spying. We know that much of the same problems that plagued the FBI in the 50s and the 60s, where they sort of took on, in the words of the U.S. Senate, a role of viewing themselves as defenders of the quote-unquote existing social and political order. And with that role, they were sort of blurred the line or were unable to distinguish between criminal activity and social protests, social movements. And we know today that the FBI frequently, uses its counterterrorism authorities to go after people who are completely nonviolent, completely peaceful by their own admissions, and subject them to surveillance on the basis that because of their views, they're somehow more likely to be terrorists than anyone else. In the 50s and 60s and 40s, the FBI's raison d'etre was anti-communism, and they would go to great lengths to, use that justification to spy on people and make up these sorts of bizarre and absurd connections. Well, this person could be influenced by a communist, or they have views the communists might like, and therefore have to go after them. Today it's all focused on counterterrorism, and while being a terrorist, unlike being a communist, has a little bit more of a law enforcement nexus, they're doing the same sort of thing where it's just clearly they take people with views they don't like and they say, well, if you have these views, you might become a terrorist, and we're going to spy on you.
I'm trying to figure out where we are with this today, because we find out that um, even while Nelson Mandela was president of South Africa, he was still on the terrorist watch list for the United States, even as he made a state visit here as president. We find that Black Lives Matter, animal rights activists, environmentalists, they're on the terrorist watch list. And yet, what happened, the people who had mounted the insurrection at the Capitol, they were completely missed. They're kind of sort of called domestic terrorists now, but we don't even call them that. We say they're white supremacists, even though, it's like, wait a minute. I mean, before I get back to you, Dwight, Chip, is this like an extension of COINTELPRO that we're seeing?
So I want to be careful about saying extension of COINTELPRO, because COINTELPRO was one program amongst a number of repressive FBI programs. People who were subject to COINTELPRO were almost always subject to one of the other many FBI programs. COINTELPRO was specifically the term the FBI used for its dirty tricks or quote unquote covert actions that went beyond mere surveillance. And it's perfectly possible the FBI is still doing that, but the hard evidence isn't there. But the types of surveillance is absolutely still going on. And if you look at how the FBI defines domestic terrorist threats, you have these categories, one of which is anti-government, anti-authority extremist. Okay, what's an anti-government, anti-authority extremist? It's someone who's opposed to racial, economic, or social hierarchies, right? Well, that's a very broad category. That would include Occupy Wall Street protesters. That would include anti-fascist protesters. You then have this category called racially motivated violent extremists. What does that include? Well, it includes people who are opposed to police killings of Black people, arguing that if people are upset about these police killings, they could then go out and engage in lethal retaliatory violence. So the very way they define the quote-unquote domestic terrorist movements in this country are so broad that it encompasses huge swaths of politically protected speech. And on top of that, the FBI embraces this idea of radicalization theory or preventative policing, which sort of asserts that there's a set path to how someone becomes a violent extremist, quote unquote violent extremist. And this is pretty widely debunked by social scientists. And it starts with the adaptation of radical ideas. So first you have the opposition to the social, racial, economic hierarchies. First you have the opposition to police murder. Then you go out and you become the quote unquote violent extremist. And if you're doing that on a preventative policing model, i.e. you're going to try to stop people before they become violent extremists, that is totally giving the FBI carte blanche to go out and look at people for their political views and treat them as potential or future terrorists based solely on the exercise of entirely legitimate political views.
Dwight McKee, having lived through this particular period and having seen so much of this yourself, I think of, and he's been, God rest his soul, he was public about having been sent to kill Reverend Jackson, Howard Pointer, having been sent by the Red Squad, which is the Chicago Police Department and FBI, all of that. What do you make of this? What was it? Take us back a little bit.
Yeah, I remember Howard well. Well, the COINTELPRO, let me do your last question for 1 second. COINTELPRO was very specific, and its goal, according to J. Edgar Hoover, was to stop the rise of another Black Messiah. Very specific. And what that was about was, you have to understand, and this is what I think that we don't get sometimes, that Black Americans are the margin of profit for capitalism, particularly in this country. is that the only thing that works, that allows capitalism to work in this country, is that we are either the cheap labor base or a free labor base, and was doing the agriculture in the South, sharecropping. They was leasing us out to the prison system, and we was working there for free, basically. And the prison systems getting, the privatized systems getting paid. Or in the North, we were for the industrialists. That cheap labor base that they were able to play off against the immigrants who came over here to make sure that they were not able to unionize in such a way as to redistribute the wealth in the country. And so the basic thing that allows capitalism to work in the Americas is we being the margin of profit. And so a black messiah was the biggest threat to that. When Dr. King started talking about in his, mountaintop speech that he wanted a redistribution of wealth, he became a danger to that whole system. When Medgar Evers started talking about he wanted a redistribution of the rights of the political power in the South, he became a danger to that system. When Fred Hampton started talking about he was a revolutionary and the power should go to the people, he became a danger to that system. And so in COINTELPRO, they wanted to make sure that nobody like that rose up again. Broadly, she's done a terrific job of outlining the net that they then put anybody who became a threat to that system at any level. And the buzzword was that if they were not pro-capitalist, that is, if they were not willing to submit themselves to the shackles of capitalism, then they were communists. If they were talking about redistribution of wealth, then they were communists. And so that net went from Dr. King all the way to the House on Un-American Activities, which declared everybody a communist. Just as a side note, for her, the greatness of what they were doing in terms of fighting the House of Un-American Activities is them organizing the union in the North as part of their union group were the meat packers, Addie Wyatt and Charlie Hayes, who are the ones that really brought Dr. King to Chicago and who were responsible for your father ending up in Chicago. And that's putting a base operation in Chicago.
Well, they helped him because Reverend came up here to be at the University of Chicago, but they helped him as he was organizing, right?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. But they direct brought Dr. King in the city.
Right.
And to start that movement in '64. And so they had a great impact on the civil rights movement because it ended up one big fight, us trying to protect anybody who was revolutionary or even progressive in their thinking became a threat to the whole system, to that whole system of the status quo.
Well, you know what? I don't think it should be lost on us that it was the former head of a liberal union who was used, who became a corporatist and a right winger, Ronald Reagan, who helped to break the union movement in the United States, Dwight and Chip Gibbons. I mean, how ironic is that? And so I think I want to hear from you, everybody. Call me, text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Where do you think this revelation will go? Or do you think it's something that you want to dismiss? It doesn't matter now. Let me ask you this, Dwight. Does it matter now? Does this revelation matter now?
Yeah, it does matter. One, for the sake of truth. They really should take J. Edgar name off that building. And secondly, for the sake of scrutiny, so we will know what they're doing now. Is the church committee, we really need to reinvestigate what the church committee had to say about these guys and the dirty tricks, because the beat goes on. They still operate, in that same rhythm and that same spirit. And we need to understand how it's set up so that we can scrutinize and protect ourselves.
Chip Gibbons, important today? Yes? No?
Yes, I believe it's absolutely important today because in order to understand the present, we have to understand how we got here. And if we hadn't had these heavy-handed interventions by the FBI and other agencies into political and social movements, who knows what this country would look like today instead of the way it does look.
You know what? We're going to take your calls on the other side of the break. Well, let me try to get Mama D, I'm going to get you on the other side of the break, okay? So everyone continue to call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. New claims surrounding the Malcolm X assassination surface in a letter written by Ray Wood, who was an NYPD officer who was recruited to infiltrate civil rights organizations, wreak havoc, um, exploit breaches, exploit the pain. But, getting along with people is never easy. And of course, there was a break within the Nation of Islam, and that was exploited. And one of the most brilliant leaders we've ever known was killed in the breach. Got to learn some lessons from that, everybody. We need to know, as you say, Chip Gibbons from Defending Rights and Dissent, as you say, Dwight McKee, National Action Network and Operation Push, and Rainbow Push. Hey, we need to know what's past is prologue. If it happened then, it can happen again. We need to know what happened. We need to know what happened. And you know what? His family. I can hear something in the background, everybody. Okay. His family, Malcolm X's family, need to know. Think about this, everybody. His wife was pregnant with twins, and she had their 4 little girls with her. They witnessed this. How cruel. How cruel. How cruel. Think about that, everybody. They deserve closure. But we do too. Because we all lost a little bit of something, a little bit of our best selves on that day. When they killed Malcolm X, and when they killed Dr. King, and when they killed John Brown, and when they killed Medgar Evers, and on and on and on it goes. Gotta think about that, everybody. Think about that. Think about it. Stay right here with more of the Santita Jackson Show. Call me, text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Get to talk about some more about this, Malcolm X revelations, and John Nichols in the next hour of the Santita Jackson Show. Okay, Dwight and Chip, this is a whole lot. Chaparral, you said accomplices are still alive. Call on in.
Attorney Fancher's here now.
Okay, Attorney Fancher, how are you? Attorney Fancher?
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's wonderful to hear your voice. I always have to let you finish with all of your tasks, your appointed tasks in the morning. And so you're joining Chip Gibbons from Defending Rights and Dissent, and of course, Dwight McKee from National Action Network, Operation Push, Rainbow Push. He has been all over the waterfront, serving and working with people for more than 50 years. Do we still have Dr. Deborah Furholden on with us?
We do.
Okay, let me
She may have stepped
I'm
away.
here. I'm just listening.
Okay.
I'm just listening.
What do you think about what you've heard, Dr. Deborah Furholden?
As always, it's a great history lesson, and it's not just the past; it's more recent history that's very relevant. So I'm loving the conversation, loving it.
Oh, bless your heart, bless your heart. It's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, it always lets you. It helps you to see that there's a story behind the story. Right. I mean, because Dwight and I remember Howard Pointer, and we remember when he was outed as a spy, and when he went through the whole story of how he was sent by the Red Squad, he was recruited. He went in to become you remember that, Dwight. He went in to become a police officer, and the same thing happened to this guy, Ray Wood. He was pulled out of the academy and put into a special program, and then he was sent into the community to push directly. Breadbasket, which became Push, Operation Push, And he became part of Black Men Pushing. And Black Men Pushing, Chip Gibbons and Attorney Fancher and Dr. Deborah Holden. Push was really set up like a church. And Black men, you had the women who were the ushers, and you had Black Men Pushing, who were ushers slash security, because they were determined not to have another black martyr. So they became like security for us. Had full time jobs, but their other full time job was making sure that we were all okay. And he rose up very high very quickly in that, and he used to drive my father around. That's what was so disconcerting. And when he was outed, he said, "You know what? I understood I had done a complete mock up of your home. So I knew not only your patterns, but I knew every uh, point of entry and exit in your home. And I had so many opportunities to kill Reverend." He said, "But as I got to know him and you and your mom and the kids, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Bless his heart." Um, he was outed, and it became a really, really big story. Um, Hot mess, and our people really wanted to deal with him. My father would not let them do it. And Howard became, really part of he was already part of the Push family, but we were always very worried about him, were we not, Dwight? That something would happen to him, like Bill O'Neill, you know, uh, you know, um, who was the informant who got Fred Hampton killed. Boy, oh boy. So Dwight, I mean, you remember Howard Pointer? I've got a couple of minutes before we come up.
Yeah, very well. Howard was ended up a great guy. What happened? It was he really met the family, but he also got involved in the social relationships at Breadbasket. It is that in that the push act up. I mean, the Breadbasket was so much like a family, and once you start going to the little card parties and the little picnics and the picket lines, and his blackness really kind of kicked in, and he became really a active part of the family, and it broke him down emotionally. And I remember that chap, he confessed and said, "Yeah, I came here to kill there, but here is my story, here is my song." And at some point, people just reached out and accepted him, and it emotionally, he became emotionally and philosophically converted, and also ended up working with your brother
Yeah,
until he died.
yeah, he was, and he was very close to us until he died. He, became part of the family. We buried him, eulogized him, and he was part of the family. But you see these things up close and personal. I mean, because I've seen Bill O'Neill, well, the late Bill O'Neill, the informant who infiltrated the Black Panthers, and you could see that what he did to Fred Hampton and Mark Clark and to the Black Panthers, he was a broken man. He was a broken man. Um, Awful. But I think it's important for us to talk about this today. Um, Mark Fancher, when we come back up in about a minute and a half, because what's past is prologue. Mark and Chip and Dwight and Dr. Deborah Holden. If you do not know how this operates, shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. I've got about a minute. You want to say anything, Mark, before we come up?
Oh no, I was sitting here learning.
No,
So
it's
I'll
a lot.
continue to do that.
Well, I can't wait. Well, we cannot wait to hear what you've got to say about this. Deborah, do you want to jump in? I know you're learning, you're listening. But
I'm just listening. I'm just listening.
well, I love having her in these conversations because she is such an activist, and is someone who is an organizer. And you use your role as an epidemiologist. That's your weapon. Fighting. You said, no, I'm not fighting for just equality. I'm fighting for equity. And and Barbara Jean, that's right. Howard Pointer did have a wonderful celebration of life at Rainbow Push. Absolutely, we loved Howard and still do, and still do. Bless his heart, bless his heart, bless his heart. But and these are all human beings, and They get recruited and they can do a whole lot of damage, but I can't help but think about Malcolm X's children, his babies, and his wife, who was pregnant with twins at the time, having witnessed his murder. And, you see it on them today. You see it on them today. And they've all become very accomplished, beautiful, brilliant women. But that's designed to destroy you. Horrible thing that they did. You can't. Horrible. Horrible. So we will come up in a hot second, everybody. Stay right there.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Tuesday, February 23rd, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. This is WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. This is the Santita Jackson Show doing morning drive on the largest progressive stations in the United States of America. Just kind of think of it this way. We have a 50-50 split in the United States Senate. 50 Republicans, 50 Democrats. Of course, our Vice President, Kamala Harris, is a tiebreaker. But as David Daley, the author of Rat Aft and Unrigged, these two brilliant books you need to read, as he says, the 50 Democratic senators represent 41 million more persons than the Republicans. Think about that. So that's right. Let's continue to grow progressive radio, because I think that's kind of where America really ought to be, right? So you need everybody. But think about that, everybody. Call or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text. And, of course, Meet the Morning Stars. We're all across all of these platforms now. I have a new YouTube page. I need you to like and subscribe, everybody. We want to continue to grow these numbers, and thank you for doing that. The Santita Jackson Show. The Santita Jackson Show. So please, please like and subscribe. And, of course, we're there, and we are also over here on Facebook on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. page, and my Santita Jackson page. I can't take any more people on the Santita Jackson page, but you can become my friend on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. So please do that. Please do that. And of course, I have a new Twitter handle, at the Santita J Show, at the Santita J Show. Of course, I still have at Santita J, but I need you to join me over there as well. So let's get right to it, as we going to be welcoming John Nichols at the bottom of the hour. And we've welcomed Attorney Mark Fancher from the National Conference of Black Lawyers to the show, joining Chip Gibbons of Defending Rights and Dissent, and Dwight McKee, and of course, Dr. Deborah Verholzen is just holding on. She said, I'm learning as we talk about Malcolm X and these revelations about his assassination and who was behind it. Sending our love to Kenneth Rush today. He is getting stronger every day, and Medi getting stronger every day, sending you much love. Kenneth, we are so glad to know that you are healing, that you are on the mend, dedicating the show today to two icons in the African American community, Douglas Turner Ward, Negro Ensemble Theater. If you wanted to be an African American and go into theater, if you wanted to mount a play, I mean, in legitimate theater, as they call it, the Negro Ensemble Theater was your platform. It was your platform. It touched everybody. Samuel Jackson, Denzel Washington, Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis. The list goes on and on. Luke Gossett, Angela Bassett, Felicia Rashad. If you wanted to go into theater, he, as an African American, he was your ticket. And we thank God for all the work that he did. Liz Nolan, owner of Natural Motion, really the most exclusive Black hair boutique. That's really what it was in Washington, D.C. When most African Americans in Washington of prominence worked for the government, she was an entrepreneur. Owned blocks of real estate, became a multimillionaire, was one of the last persons trained by Vidal Sassoon, a brilliant beauty mogul. And we thank God for her life and lessons. Everybody, today we're going to have a high of 39 degrees, partly cloudy. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 38 degrees, scattered showers. The Dow closed up 27 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 341 points. The S&P 500 closed down 30 points. And let us look at this sad statistic. More than 500,000 Americans have died from coronavirus. We are 4% of the world, 20% of the deaths. Something to think about, everybody. More than 28 million people have been infected. Even as the numbers continue to go down, think about the healthcare workers. 3,448 of them have died thus far from this. 4 million family members have been left grieving as a result of this pandemic. It's something for us to think of. And today, President Biden's job approval ratings are quite high, 58%, everybody. And of course, he and the Vice President, Kamala Harris, held a memorial service for the 500,000 persons who have died from COVID 19. Merrick Garland might be our new Attorney General. It seems like the votes are there. He says that the Capitol riot investigation will be his top priority. He also gave a tearful declaration of why it is that he feels compelled to serve. It turns out his grandparents were escaping anti Semitism, came to the United States. He said, and I want to give back to the country that gave so much to my family. Blessings to him. This is unacceptable. That is the headline in Common Dreams. Progressives reject West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin's proposal to cut the $15 an hour minimum wage proposals to $11. Now, $11 an hour is the minimum wage in West Virginia, but progressives are saying no, no, no. And what about this? Rodney Reese, 18 years of age, was arrested on the 16th of February in Plano, Texas, and he was charged with being a pedestrian in the roadway. Can you believe this? Yeah, walking while black. A misdemeanor charge has been dropped against this young black man who was arrested for walking home on a street during a snowstorm in Texas. You cannot make this stuff up. Speaking of the craziness in Texas, there's a gentleman whose light stayed on during the storm. Veteran, 63 years of age, Scott Willoughby. He said his savings are gone. Why? Because he owes $16,752 for his electric bill. And he had to charge it to his credit card at 70 times what he pays for his utilities, everybody, combined. Wow. Awful, awful, awful. Let's get right to it. We're welcoming attorney Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers, great civil libertarian, brilliant lawyer. And of course, Dr. D. Of course, we got two Dr. D's with us today. Dr. D, that's right, Dwight McKee, National Action Network, Operation Push, founding board member, a Rainbow Push, and of course, Chip Gibbons, policy director for Defending Rights and Dissent. And of course, listening in is Dr. Deborah Furholden. Always love having her stay with us. She said, I just want to learn. So, okay, we got it. Let's start with you, Mark Fancher. What about this revelation from this gentleman, Ray Wood, former NYPD police officer, who said, you know what? I wrote a letter. He wrote a letter in 2011. He said, I don't want it released until my death. And he went through how he was recruited by the NYPD and how he worked with NYPD and the FBI to disrupt the civil rights movement and ultimately to kill Malcolm X. What do you make of this story?
Well, on the one hand, it is not at all surprising. And on the other hand, it continues to be something that would perplex the average person. It's not at all surprising because the complicity of the federal government in the assassination of an electrifying leader is totally consistent with the way the powers that be have dealt with African people since they first arrived on these shores. The objective has always been to monitor, control, and contain a population that has always been perceived as a troublesome population, one that was certainly angry and disgruntled and looking to resist and to overthrow the established order. So that as early as the days on the plantation, there were efforts made to identify those who were trying to organize insurrections or rebellions or resistance, and to punish them in ways that would discourage and dissuade anybody else from following their lead. I mean, and it was always done in a way that was brutal. Everyone knows about the floggings that took place on the plantation, but many don't know about the sadistic tortures that were also employed. I mean, for example, in South Carolina, a rebellious African would be placed inside of a large barrel. It would be nailed shut, and then they would drive long spikes and nails through the sides of it. And while everybody else, all the other Africans on the plantation were made to watch, the barrel would be rolled around and rolled around so that everybody could listen to him scream to his death. So, the brutality of this, the lynchings that occurred in subsequent eras, all of these things are quite common and consistent with the way that the powers that be have dealt with an oppressed population. But I think the part that continues to surprise many and is very difficult to understand is how, a member of the African community, the African family, could bring himself to become such a horrific traitor, someone who could betray people that presumably he had come to know and had come to love. And, I think that to begin to understand that, it helps to look at the first notorious traitor, and that is Judas, and his psychology. And also to heed the admonition that Jesus gave, not to become so focused on the things of this world, but to remain set on those things which are beyond it and which provide, unerring moral guidance. And what happens with these traders very often is that they place as their priority focal point acceptance, conformity with the ways of this world, and adopting the moral codes of this world, rather than those which are they should be receiving through conscience. So these people who think that, well, what I'm going to do is, the police and the FBI, they're on the side of law and order. They represent what is supposedly good in this world. They are the good guys in this scenario, and therefore my working with them is a good thing to do. That is the right thing to do because they represent law and order. These are individuals who become terribly and fatally confused because they have not listened to conscience. They have not listened to what they know, is the clear indication of the humanity and the goodness of the people that they've been turned against. So there are lessons in all of this, and I guess, the last thing that continues to confuse me is how an individual, knowing that he has betrayed, has carried out such a terrible betrayal, has come to that realization, is still unwilling during his lifetime to come forward and to tell what he knows, to prevent, continuing suffering by people who continue to suffer as a result of this assassination. And that is a question that I think that many of us will just have to continue to pray about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kenneth, why don't you call in with your question? I want you to do that. Call in, call in, call in. You have a question about my brother,
Yeah,
Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. Dwight McKee?
yeah. If I can respond, good morning, Mark. Is what they did was they used the two greatest incentives, which is reward and punishment. They either put the guys on payroll and pay them, or they threatened that to put them behind bars for some crime or some contrived crime. And so a guy like the spy for the Panthers, for example,
Bill
the
O'Neill?
police told him, O'Neill, yeah, that I think he had stolen a car in Gary, and they told him they was gonna give him big time, big time, because it was in a state, and that they would put him away, based on all his little convictions, and his only option was, in order to resolve the issue with them, was to spy on Fred. But also they put him on the payroll, $300-400 a week, for a guy that don't have a job, that's kind of struggling. And so they just build in incentives, is punishment or reward.
Why don't you,
And
Tip
to,
Gibbon? Yes,
may
I'm
I
sorry,
respond very
Mark?
quickly?
Of course, of
Yeah,
course.
I was going to say, I think that is, it is an excellent example of, why we can't be conformed to this world, because the same kind of pressure was put on Jesus.
Absolutely.
The same type of incentives were placed, but knowing what was the right thing to do, he just went ahead and went through the crucifixion. And there are so many former Panthers and others who also followed his example and who did not go for the easy way out. You know, they were convicted and became political prisoners, and some of them, you know, God bless them, are still hanging on in prison to this day. So there's always a choice that people have. You know, they can be threatened, they can be bribed, they can be offered the easy way. But if they're following their moral compass, then at a certain point they just recognize that they have to go through their own personal crucifixion and do the right thing. And these individuals just did not do that.
And you have to. Well, hold on. Let me bring Chip Gibbons in. Chip.
Yeah, I think what's really important to remember is that, you know, the FBI still uses informants, and they still use a lot of these tactics. They coerce people into becoming informants by threatening to bring criminal charges against them. They offer them money. The informants will go into particularly the Muslim community, but also activist communities, and will try to get people to engage in ridiculous plots that the FBI has made up. You know, there was a case in New Jersey where there was an informant. He was sent to a mosque for some reason. No one knows why they picked this mosque. He finds people in the parking lot who are, you know, sort of unwell, sort of a number of problems. And they keep trying to ditch him as sort of a provocateur. But, you know, the one eventually loses his job at Walmart. And, you know, the informant had offered him, you know, a large amount of money, a barber shop, a trip to Florida, all these types of things, if he would carry out this fake terror plot the FBI had invented. And at that point, he goes through with it. And, you know, there was a story that came out, I guess it was last week, about a meat animal slaughtering plant somewhere that had a whistleblower blow the whistle on how they were cruelly getting rid of the pigs in relationship to COVID. And the FBI approached the whistleblower and asked him if he would be willing to try to sell drugs to the animal rights activists who had helped him get his story out, in order to then entice those activists into becoming informants by setting up on drug charges. So getting people who have are facing criminal charges, paying people off, is still an extremely common tactic of the FBI. I know many people are concerned about what the NSA is doing, where they're sucking up all of our metadata on the internet, and that's, you know, very frightening in its own right. But it doesn't matter how secure your communications are if the person you're communicating with is a government informant, which is still the FBI's top tactic. And I would just say one thing on this topic. When Trump issued the Muslim ban, he went through several executive orders, and the courts kept, you know, doing things with them. In the one executive order where he finally gave his reasoning for having a Muslim ban, he cited two supposed terror plots involving refugees. Both of those plots were instances where an FBI informant set the person up. And the one case Trump cited was cited as the judge as an example of quote unquote imperfect entrapment. So they go out, they send these informants in, they get people to agree to do these sort of fictitious terror plots, and then the FBI and Donald Trump and people like that turn around and say, hey, look at all this terrorism. You need to give us more tools, more money, more repression. So it's a very self-perpetuating and disturbing cycle.
Let me go to you, Pam. What's on your mind today, Pam?
Santita, good morning, Santita.
Good
morning to you and your panel.
Good morning.
Wonderful discussion, particularly this Black History Month. So I'm going to try to compose myself on one issue with Merrick Garland, but first I'm going to speak to Malcolm.
Okay,
Santita, during this month of celebration, so many of our leaders have been taken from us, and that just creates an uneasiness, an unsteadiness, I think, for the entire Black community. But with Malcolm specifically, was his assassination, because they've always portrayed it, well, it was within the nation. And they've always tried to make us not trust the nation since his assassination. So if you would speak to that, you and your guest, I hope I made that question clear. And lastly, Santita, Merrick Garland's expression of what his family went through and how he felt about this country, I have the exact opposite feeling. And not too many people, particularly the white people or this country, want to hear that from Black people. What this country meant to Merrick Garland is just the opposite of what this country has done to my ancestors, my great-grandmother, all the unrealized potential. And don't get me wrong, Santita, I understand we've got to celebrate the living and all of the beautiful accomplishments of Black people. But what about the unrealized potential?
Absolutely.
The lost lives from enslavement.
Yes.
When Merrick Garland made that, I saw that brought tears to my eyes because our people didn't have the luxury of saying that we're immigrants over here and this country rescued us. They saved us. It was not only the European countries, but this country and others enslaving Black people. And I want the white community to speak to that and understand that. And so I still ask today, what are they going to do to eradicate racism? Where are the sermons in their churches every Sunday talking about racism and hatred? Santita, you know your father talks to us about not hating this country, not hating, loving people, making change.
Well, and hold
Who
on.
is going to hold the
and to challenge
to that scene?
And to challenge. Wait, let's not skip over that, because that's always been the rub with him, that he has always believed in challenging. Because many of us will talk about forgiveness and we go past the pain. He's never done that. He's never done that. Kenneth, I want you to call in at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. I want you to put your question before the whole audience. 773-763-9278. We're going to deal with this here now, and I want to dispel a myth. Because you had a question about Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. And I want to give you the space here to ask your question. Call me. We're going to have John Nichols on here. You know, he and I are going to talk about some other things, but this is a full conversation. And I think this is very, very much a part of why we have this platform. It's such a blessing to be able to hear from Mama D, who we're going to hear from on the other side, and Pam. As you listen to the pain, even though we are generations removed, Pam, from slavery, the pain is still there. The pain of the Holocaust, you saw that on Merrick Garland. And you should. But you should see the pain of slavery on us. We should not be unwilling to talk to the descendants of those who were enslaved here, to those who came into the Americas and Central America and the Caribbean on this colonial experiment. We've got to deal with that. Until we deal with that, we're not going to be a whole people. More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Pam, you okay? I think Pam might have gone. Okay. So
Yeah, Pam dropped out.
Okay, very, very good. Because we always have to keep the phone. Because we need another phone line, right? Adrian, thank you so much, and Stanley, thank you so much.
I meant to say Nichols is here.
Okay, John Nichols, how are you? John?
Hello, Santita. How are you?
We're doing well. We've been caught up in this story about the revelations about those who conspired to kill Malcolm X. So I'm going to answer just one more question before we get to you, but we've got attorney Mark Fancher from the, of course, you can feel free to comment on that because you've been a long time political activist and progressive activist, and we've dealt with our fair share of informants so we saw this in Michael Moore's movie, in which they were trying to figure out why they were in this peace organizing meeting. Basically doing kumbaya, and it was a white crowd, everybody. But the one person who was pushing for violence, they were like, whoa, hold on. We're not trying to storm the Bastille. We're not trying to burn anything down. So, no, just that's not what we're trying to do. It turns out they found out that he was a police officer. He was an informant sent to disrupt them. I think they were opposing the invasion of Iraq. So this is something, don't think this just happens to black people, everybody. Progressive protests, progressive movements are infiltrated to this day, to this day. Not corporatist movements, just progressive people who fight for everybody here. But Mark Fancher, are you still here? And Chip Gibbons and Dwight
I'm
McKee?
still.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
But we've got
Hmm.
John Nichols
I'm
from
still
the
here.
Nation. Oh, I'm so glad. We've got John Nichols from the Nation. He's here, of course, every Tuesday at the bottom of the hour. And we've, I have to tell you, John, I've been looking at the Neera Tanden nomination process, and that has been fascinating. There's a lot. I mean, Merrick Garland, that's fascinating. Watching the pushback, the Republicans push against Neera Tanden, and the
Yeah.
progressives. It's like
The big one today is going to be Deb Haaland with Interior, and she's been getting a lot of pushback as well because she has been so progressive on pipeline issues and a host of other things. And the fossil fuel folks really want to stop her. We should also be keeping an eye on the.
Do you think?
I think she will, but there'll be a fight. There'll be a fight, and because she's one, Neera Tanden, fine. There's a lot of people push back and forth on that,
Yes.
But they're really afraid. The fossil fuel folks and others are really afraid of Deb Haaland because she would be a transformational Secretary of the Interior, the first Native American woman.
Yes.
First Native American. And so this is a big one. The other one to keep a real close eye on is Xavier Becerra at Health and Human Services. They're trying, it's a very dishonest attack on him. They're trying to suggest that because he's not a doctor, because he's not, a healthcare expert, that he shouldn't be in charge of HHS. They're missing the point. HHS is our social service agency. It is our agency that deals with a range of things that need to be done. And Becerra is extremely well qualified for the position, but they will lie about him and they will spread a lot of fantasy. So this is a week of a lot of sort of intense push and pull.
I don't want to miss that. I mean, and if Bill Gates is going to oversee our health care and our farmland, I mean, just thought I'd put that out there. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. But I'm going to take one last phone call. Dylan Altoff, did he call in?
I have not seen it yet.
Okay, very good. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Of course, we've got John Nichols from The Nation. We've been talking about Malcolm X and those who were part of the plot to kill him. They did kill him, but they didn't kill his idea. They didn't kill his ideals. Malcolm X is as relevant today as he was more than 50 years ago. Long may he live. And everything just, these issues keep coming up. When they kept trying, Murley Evers kept trying to find out, everyone in town knew who killed Medgar Evers, but this man was allowed to walk freely, and Byron Della Beckwith, can you imagine? She moved out to California with her family. But can you imagine this man walked around having killed her husband in front, just on the other side of the door of Mrs. Evers and their 3 children? This is horrible. Horrible, everybody. But when they exhumed his body, do you know that his body was completely intact? His body was completely intact. They said it's as if he had been buried the day before. You can't make this stuff up, everybody. So before we go to John Nichols, because he is going to roll out for us what else we should be watching for this week, because you have a lot of consequential picks. We're still getting feedback, Dylan. We have a lot of consequential cabinet level picks and presidential appointments that are right there on the table. And these people will have tremendous impact upon how we live over the next few years. And we need to look at who is being embraced and who's being pushed aside. So let me go to you, Kenneth. Very quickly, how you doing, Kenneth?
Thanks. How you doing,
How are you feeling?
To talk to you on the air for the very first time.
Yes.
I'd like to say first of all
Well, honey,
that
I need you to go get a little quick because I gotta move on to this. But go on and say what you need to say, sweetie.
oh, okay. First, I want to say that I've been sent on a Nation of Islam hit squad before, and my first time ever going to a Nation of Islam meeting, I was I was pushed into a busload of people, and we were going to do a hit on a play called Three Black Men. And first time at a Nation of Islam meeting. So does the Nation of Islam carry out hits? Yes, they do. So as for did the Nation of Islam?
What that I've never No, Kenneth, I need you to get right to it, honey, because I gotta get a couple of other callers
Okay.
here. But I've never. Let me say this: I've never heard that. Wait, about the Nation of Islam ever before. Ever. I've only heard about all the wonderful things that they do to uplift people. But very quickly, Kenneth, your question was what?
Okay, my question was that I wanted to clear up because I respect Congressman Jackson.
Yes.
I respect Reverend. I met your father when I was 16 years old. And I'm 60 now.
Yes.
And I respected him from ever since I met him. Because I've been around people in the Nation of Islam, I've heard gospel. I heard Reverend Al. I heard Jesse Jr. I was even once asked to be an informant. I just heard these things, and I said, listen, I never believed them because they even said that my older brother was an informant. So I never believed them, but I wanted people to, while we were on this subject about informants, I wanted that out.
Well, I will tell you this. When my brother ran into his legal difficulties, and we did everything we could, they didn't want any of the money back. They didn't want any of none of the items that he went to jail for. They didn't want any of that back. It was very clear that they wanted him to go to prison, and they were going to put him away for the rest of his natural life for 30 years. 30 years. And what was stunning to the establishment was when my brother shut down um, the investigation. He said, "Send me to jail for however long you need to send me to jail for." That threw everybody off. But that's what he did do. He said, "Whatever it is that you need to do, you just do what you've got to do." So, an informant? No, he was not that. He was willing to take his time, and he offered, in fact, in front of the court, just before he was sentenced, he asked the judge to give him, he said, "If you see fit to give my wife," they're now divorced, but he said, "If you see fit to give my wife any time, I want you to give it to me. I'm her husband. Let me serve it." So that's the kind of guy that my brother is, bless his heart. So thank you so much, Kenneth. You know I love you, but I'm just trying to roll through a couple calls. Chapearl, what's on your mind?
Yes, Santita, thank you so much for taking my call this morning. I wanted to say it's important to actually pursue this and to find out what happened because of the fact that some people are still alive. There are still people who are connected, who can still give vital information, and that can give closure to Malcolm X family. I encourage everyone to also to watch the documentary "Who Killed Malcolm X" that was released in 2019, and it basically opened some new information about the mosque that was in New Jersey and the possible killers that conspired to kill Malcolm. So we know that this was not something that was done by one lone killer. We know that there was a conspiracy to kill him. And we know that our government has been all up in killing of Black people in our Black leadership to silence them and to keep us suppressed. So we are very clear on those avenues they have used to basically prevent us from excelling. And we see that every day. Up until this moment, we see that anybody who is trying to uplift Black people or to put us in a better position, something happens to them or they try to destroy everything that surrounds them. And that's just my take on it.
I hear you. Mama D, what's on your mind? Mama D? Well, you know what? I'm going to shift over to you, John, and I will say this as we make this little shift. Um, these leaders are always killed when they're their most vulnerable, when they are at their lowest ebb of popularity within the Black community. Dr. King had a more than 55% disapproval rating in the Black community when he was assassinated. Malcolm X spoke to an almost empty Audubon ballroom. He was a very controversial figure. It's the more unpopular they get in the Black community, the more vulnerable you are to assassination. Always remember that. John Nichols. Wow, we're fighting for the soul of our Democratic Party. But I told you, you got another book now. We've got to fight for the soul of the United States, of our country. There's a whole lot at stake right now. And I think that as we look at the coronavirus deaths, and we should rightly look at that, the fact that we're 4% of the world and 20% of the deaths, 500,000 people, it's just unbelievable. We're still not talking about a national health plan, universal single payer, which surely would help mitigate this. We are now, in the meantime, we've got the Merrick Garland hearing. We've got Neera Tanden, who's up for Office of Management and Budget. Those are tremendously important positions. Department of Interior, important. Department of Agriculture, which oversees every city of a population of 500,000 or fewer. All of these people are being heard like right now. So talk to me about what we find ourselves in the midst of right now.
Yeah, I think we should put it in perspective. Often cabinet picks are begin to be reviewed even before a president comes in, especially your national security and some of your other key positions. Certainly, when a president comes in, that tends to happen very, very quickly. So you see late January, early February. This year, we've had a couple of factors that complicated it. That was not only the impeachment process, which was right and necessary. Holding Donald Trump to account for what he did was something that had to happen. But you also had the sort of complex negotiation between Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell for control of the Senate, that 50-50 split that they had to sort out. So a lot of things got delayed. Now, suddenly, after impeachment, conviction, or the trial done, no conviction, unfortunately, we're into the thick of it. And all the things that were put off come to a head. That's why there are so many hearings this week. And there's a lot of attention on the Merrick Garland hearing because there are so many issues that Garland will have to address upon becoming Attorney General. He will make it through. He will be Attorney General. That isn't going to be that complicated. The fact of the matter is, had they given him hearings and a vote when he was nominated for U.S. Supreme Court, he would have made it to the Supreme Court as well. That's one of the subtleties of this. With Neera Tanden, I mean, look, that's a fight that's deep in world of politics and all of her tweets and stuff like that. I'll leave that to other people. Certainly, OMB is important, but it's one that folks love to gossip about on all sorts of sides. Now, let's get into the ones that really matter and the fights that are going to be consequential. Deb Haaland, who has been nominated for Secretary of Interior, that's a huge, huge nomination because she is a Native American woman. She would be a groundbreaking secretary in that department. But more than that, she comes as a true progressive, someone who has been involved in battles to save the planet. And in that position, that's what you want. She's also someone who the fossil fuel industry, right-wingers are going to do everything they can to stop her. She faces genuine opposition. Senator Cornyn from Texas, among others, have already been tweeting about and signaling things they don't like about her. They're going to try and portray her as dangerously radical or out of touch and all sorts of things. Those will be lies. And we need to be conscious of that and rally to make sure that Deb Haaland makes it through. I think she can, but I do think there's a fight there.
But I particularly now with given what's happening in Texas, the Department of Interior, I would think would be of tremendous consequence. Can you explain that?
Sure. Department of Interior is of tremendous consequence because, one of the things that those of us who live in east of the Mississippi are perhaps less conscious of, but the fact is the United States government owns an awful lot of the West, literally owns the land, and then oversees the other folks who own a lot of the land. And so as a result, your fossil fuel companies and your companies that want to build pipelines across, whole sections of the United States, they want a pliant Secretary of the Interior. They want somebody in that position that will let them do what they've always done. They find some oil, they go after it. They want to run a pipeline, they just do it. Well, Deb Haaland is somebody who will, where it is appropriate, say no. She's got a history of it. And she is somebody who comes, with deep, deep roots in New Mexico, and with great principles, great history. And so getting her in there would be transformational. Understand, the Department of Interior deals with so many issues of consequence for Native peoples, for the first peoples of this country. And having someone who comes from the Laguna Pueblo community in New Mexico, I hope I get this right, I believe 15th generation American. She's been here. She was here. Her people were here before the European settlers came. And so understand the rootedness of this woman and why she would be an absolutely transformational Secretary of the Interior. She's a really important nomination, and one that we should be focused on. And unfortunately, the kind of one where it will perhaps not get the attention it deserves. And so be conscious of that one. Be conscious also of California Attorney General Xavier Becerra's nomination for Health and Human Services. He is highly qualified to be in that position. He's run huge departments already as Attorney General. He's got a long, long record in Congress. This is a uniquely qualified individual for this position. And yet they are trying to undermine and prevent him with a absurd claim that, well, he's not, he doesn't come out of the medical community, right? So why would he be running Health and Human Services? And it's again, creating a fantasy that has nothing to do with the department. This department, Health and Human Services, does indeed deal with healthcare, but it also deals with human services. It is our social welfare, social justice, if you will, if we're on the right track, agency. And it's one that needs someone who has experience with legislation, who has experience with management, and frankly, who has a strong track record. Remember, Xavier Becerra is somebody who has fought for generations for Medicare for all, for public option, for expansion of healthcare. This is a real fighter on these issues. And one other thing, which some of his critics will bring up, some of them won't discuss, but it is the fact that he has been a great advocate for immigrants and for immigrant rights, and also for treating immigrants in a smart and fair and scientific way. That is to say, getting health care to our immigrant communities, because when you expand access to health care to everyone, you create a circumstance where obviously diseases can be kept under control, ailments can be dealt with, before they become crises. There's so many reasons why you want to have universal health care and not, leave people out because of their immigration status or something like that. Xavier Becerra understands this, and it's one of the reasons why he is a uniquely strong candidate for that position, a very, very good pick, and unfortunately one that you will see a real effort to try and undermine him. And so I'm setting up those two because I think those are two fights that progressives need to be conscious of. Haaland and Becerra need to be confirmed, not merely because they're good people and the right people to be in those positions, but also because they really do build out the quality of this administration.
But I think we also need to understand what these departments do, right? I don't think we understand.
You're so right.
We don't understand the tremendous power that the Department of Agriculture has over us. I remember Reverend bringing the Secretary of Agriculture and some undersecretaries to our Rainbow Push, a Saturday morning forum years ago. And he said, you need to understand that every population, a 500,000 and under, that's what they oversee. The Department of Interior, while
Yeah,
we are looking at our infrastructure, the American Society of Civil Service, of Civil Engineers, gave America's infrastructure a D plus, but they gave energy a D. That's the Department of
yeah.
Interior. So, what kind of argument do you think that we're just going to claim Deb Haaland as the Secretary of Interior, although it's going to be a fight? Why would the
Yeah.
corporatists push against her, for example? Why would they push
Well,
back?
because of those critical, sure, their big concern is what's allowed to be done with our land and who controls our land in the Western, especially in the Western U.S. And because there are so many public lands. And historically, what you have seen is a situation where fossil fuel companies, corporatists, if you will, have kind of get a lot of easy breaks when it comes to access to the land. They are given the go-ahead and given leases and protections. They're allowed to propose pipelines and actually advance them, not necessarily always on public lands, but on lands that are either overseen or potentially touched by the Department of Interior. You need people there who are conscious of the human side, not just the money-making side of the Western United States, especially. And that's Deb Haaland. She's somebody who comes multi-generationally out of northern New Mexico, out of a community there that has roots, again, going back to before the founding of the United States. She's also, I think that the one thing to understand is she's been a member since getting elected to Congress as one of the first two Native American women in Congress of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. She is a progressive. She gets it. And the corporate types don't like that. They don't want someone who is going to watch out for the rights of Native Americans, who's going to watch out for the sustaining of the land and our long-term future as a country, not just for quick profits for an oil company or a pipeline company. They don't want that. They would prefer to have somebody there who, kind of maybe a Democratic administration would be a little critical now and again, maybe throw up a few roadblocks, but wouldn't really say, no, you can't just do what you want to do. And so that's why they actually fear her. And she's also, I've dealt with her over the years, and I can tell you, she is really good. She's really strong on, recognizing where the dangers are, recognizing where the issues are, and animating a popular response. She knows how to get people engaged and to bring a lot of communities in. So she'll be a real leader there, and a very, very important leader when she gets approved. But there'll be some potential, not certain on any of these things. It's always, we'll see where our Republican friends decide to make their fights. But I would suggest to you that that's one where there's very possibly going to be a fight, and you'll see some evidence of it today, one way or the other. And again, Becerra, a similar situation. But the core thing, Santita, that you're so right about is these agencies, these cabinet level departments, are so huge. They have tens of thousands of employees. They have budgets in the tens of billions. None of them just oversee what their title is, right? They all have within them dozens of different agencies dealing with dozens of different areas of our lives. You're right about Department of Agriculture, right? It, of course, deals with farming, right? You think, oh, agriculture, there you go. But it also is huge as regards food. And we all have some engagement with food. The other thing that Department of Agriculture does, as an example, but many of these other departments as well, huge economic development endeavors, activities, focuses. And this is important to understand because, it's often asked, how does the federal government have such a big budget, but so little of it gets back to the great mass of people, right? Why is it so often the case that it seems that the money always goes to the multinational corporations? It always goes to Wall Street. It always goes to the investors. It doesn't get back to human beings. Well, where that plays out is at the cabinet agency level, because that's where so many resources flow in, and then decisions are made about how it flows out. If we want to develop not just our rural communities, but our urban communities, and make sure that resources come to those communities, you have to have cabinet secretaries that are focused on those issues.
Well, if I could jump to here, because I think that I want us to just kind of tease that out just a little bit in these last couple of minutes. People are now planting gardens in their backyard. And we now have, they're turning a large swaths of Detroit into farmland. I mean, we farm in this part of the country. And we've been talking with the black farmers on this show, and they said, do you know you could get little subsidies for your garden in your backyard? And so we need secretaries. We need people in those agencies who are sensitive to our needs. We need a Deb Haaland who would be sensitive to the cries of the people in Texas and Mississippi and Louisiana who are dealing with busted pipelines that these people refuse to winterize. I mean, these last 2 minutes, please help us, because if she is up for approval right now, which she is, I mean, she is
today. She's
right now.
Yeah, her hearing.
Like right now, why is she important, and what do we need to do?
Sure. If you have ever cared in the least about Native American rights and about our indigenous people and the horrific multi-century assaults on the first peoples of this country, you should understand that having a Native American woman in charge of the Department of Interior is a historically transformational moment. This is a moment where you open up the door to real representation, a cabinet that looks like America. And one other thing, when you have someone who has experienced historic, long-term challenges in charge of an agency like that, she will obviously be concerned about Native Americans, but she will be concerned about every other community that has suffered discrimination, racism, that has been put down when it should have been lifted up. And so I can say with great assurance, having her in that position as Secretary of the Interior would be a transformational moment, not just for that department, but really for the federal government. That's how important it is.
Absolutely. As the Supreme Court adjudicated last year that just about half of Oklahoma has to be returned to the indigenous peoples because of the treaties. Maybe that's part of the rub. She pushed on the enforcement of treaties that we have never honored for indigenous peoples. Never, ever, ever. There's a whole lot going on in America, everybody. Keep your eyes open. Stay woke, as they say. John Nichols of The Nation magazine. Love him, love him, love him. Go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page. I'm about to post his article. I mean, we have got to be on top of this. Mark Fancher, Attorney Mark Fancher, National Conference of Black Lawyers, Dwight McKee, Dr. D, and of course, Chip Gibbons, Defending Rights and Dissent, and Dr. Deborah Fur Holden, and Reverend Stephen Thurston, teaching pastor from Salem Baptist Church. Get his book, Mirror Moments. I love you, everybody. I will see you. Thank you, Kenneth and Mama D and Chapearl and everybody for calling in today. Pam, love you, love you. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Kenneth, I hope that helped you some with that. I'm sorry I was running through. I was just trying to get through these calls. John Nichols?
Yes.
Do you have a final thought that you'd like to give to us? Because, I think there's so much going on, right? So much is going on.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming.
Well, it's overwhelming, and we're overlooking. We're overlooking. No one's talking about Deb Haaland. And heaven knows we ought to be. No,
that's right.
Right. I mean, with
that's right.
Busted pipes.
Well, we just did, and that's why this show matters so much, right? I mean, who goes into the Department of Energy and the Department of Interior and several of these other cabinet agencies? These are going to be definitional picks, and I cannot begin to emphasize that I know how we're pulled in a lot of different directions. I know how exciting it can be to continue to talk about holding Donald Trump to account, and I'm part of that discussion and very enthusiastic about it. I know how exciting it can be to focus on the Department of Justice, because that's a place where some of that can happen, and it's appropriate. Not denying that at all. I know how enthusiastic people can get about discussing Neera Tanden's tweets, right? And saying, oh well, she was a nice person or she wasn't a nice person, stuff like that. Those things, I'm not telling anybody not to have those discussions, but what I will passionately tell you is, at the end of the day, if we're talking about the transformational picks, right, the picks that, to my mind, really can get us to new places as a country, I would suggest to you that Deb Haaland at Interior, who has a hearing today, Xavier Becerra at Health and Human Services, who has hearing today and into this week, these are the nominations that won't get as much attention. And yet, look, having somebody who for more than a quarter century has been advocating for Medicare for all in Health and Human Services with Xavier Becerra, that's what you get. That's transformational. Having someone who, through her entire lifetime and through her family's long history, has advocated for Native American rights, for respect for our treaties, for respect for the land in charge of Interior, and that is truly transformational. And so that's my. You asked for a closing thought. My closing thought is, give us this next couple weeks. If you're active, if you're engaged, put a little extra time in, look a little further, pay a little more attention to these cabinet picks, because I promise you, these are the victories, if they come, that will pay off in profound ways, not just for the Biden administration or for the individual nominees, but really for this country and for the people who have often come up disappointed. You will be far less disappointed over the next 4 years if you get a great Secretary of the Interior, if you get a great Secretary of Health and Human Services, and frankly, if you build out this administration in a way that you have progressives in charge of some of these incredibly powerful agencies. So that's my closing thought. I apologize for running a little bit today.
No. But I love you. But I want to have you on before the week is out. No, I do want to have you back, because I think we need to roll out what we're looking at or what we're not looking at with these.
Well, we should, and
cabinet level positions.
I will emphasize to you.
Yeah. No, I want to do that.
Emphasize to you. You're so right about that, because these are going to come fast. We're going to be moving quickly, and it will be easy to lose things. This is a time in which we don't want to lose things because, and now it's an almost overused phrase, but it is true. Personnel is policy.
Yeah.
Who you put in charge of agencies decides what those agencies will do, with what enthusiasm, with what energy. And many of these agencies have been gutted. They have been severely damaged. I thought Merrick Garland brought that out well when, in the confirmation hearing that he was involved in yesterday. And so there's going to be a rebuilding process. That's vital. But the fact is, we don't have time to just say, oh yeah, we're going to spend the next couple of years rebuilding. We have to have a building out process. And that building out process requires visionary progressive leadership. And that's why I focus on Haaland. I focus on Becerra. Why we will talk about Martha Fudge over at agriculture and so many other people.
Yeah. I mean, the fact
really
that she wanted,
can be transformational.
She wanted agriculture, but they wouldn't give it to her. They gave it to Vilsack.
I know.
As a progressive, I got a problem with Vilsack. I mean, this is the guy who oversaw the firing of Shirley
That's why I brought it up.
Come on now, I'm hot about
that.
Hot.
Now, the fact is, Martha Fudge will get. You're right to be hot about it, and to ask the fundamental question of how a Democratic administration couldn't get that right.
No, they got it corporate.
Fudge.
They got it corporate. They got it corporate. And I have to interrupt you here, because I'm looking at all the things that Bill Gates is into. He's buying farmland. I don't think Americans realize.
They all are.
Yeah, I mean, see, I don't think Americans realize that what makes America so incredible, such an incredible opportunity for people all around the world, is that, number one, here in the United States, you can own your land. That is a rarity in the developed world. You go to England, you can buy the house. You cannot own the land. The Queen owns that.
And that's the critical thing. And that's why I brought up budget agriculture, because obviously she will get her nomination, and she will be, over at HUD, and and that's a really big thing too. So I'm not undermining it. But I am saying is that personnel is policy. When we talk about that, it's getting the right person in the right place, somebody who's enthusiastic about doing the work. And just as I think Martha Fudge would have been great at agriculture, I think Marcy Kaptur would have been great at agriculture. I happen to think, Jim Hightower, I'd still love to bring him in there. I can think of a lot of people who would have been great.
I love Marcy Kaptur.
Enthusiastic.
I love Marcy Kaptur, and I love Jim Hightower. My gosh.
Okay. But you understand that these are people who, had they come in, would have been transformational. What we're getting is somebody who probably isn't going to be, but we'll keep the pressure on there. But that's how we ought to think about it. We ought to think, okay, we know who can be transformational in a cabinet place, and we know who won't be. And what I am suggesting is that I'll stake a lot on the argument that Becerra and Holland can be transformational. So we may not get everybody we want in every place. I understand that. But we have a couple of nominations of people who can do what needs to be done. And we do not dare let our Republican friends, who pay much more attention to this, who are much more serious about it quite often, we cannot dare let them sort of do it under the radar, come in and really, quote unquote, disqualify, or to use a popular phrase of the moment, cancel a Deb Haaland, or to cancel a Xavier Becerra, because they don't happen to, it's not because they're bad players. Job is to be super vigilant, super aware, to actually have, if you, for lack of a better term, a confirmation watch, to be, into these issues, to be conscious of them as they come along, because we can't afford, we just do not have the time to give up 4 years of a Democratic administration with uninspired leadership in key places. We need inspired leadership, and I think we've got some nominees that have the potential to do that.
Can't wait to have you back. We'll do it before the week is out, because this is very, very critical. It's very critical. And these are the things, if you want to be a subject in a monarchy, then don't pay attention. But if you want to be a citizen in a republic, open up your eyes, everybody. We got to get involved. You cannot, I realize we're all pressed, but you need to know the practical things to which you will have access through the Department of Agriculture, through the Department of the Interior, through HHS. I mean, there is so much that is left on the table by all of us, because we don't know all of the programs that are in place that can help us on practical levels. On practical levels, we don't know that. So, John Nichols, I love you, and I thank you so much for all that you do. We're going to have you back before the week is out so we can talk about that, because I think we need to understand exactly what's at stake this week. Dwight McKee, are you still there?
I am.
Okay, and who else is still there? Chip Gibbons, are you still there? What about Mark? Okay, Mark, are you still there? Because I wanted you all to give some closing thoughts before. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me, but your closing thought? Let me start with you, Dwight.
Oh, I was going to simply respond to Mark's question a while ago in terms of what makes somebody turn on their own people. Is the word we're going to get enough of today is the word character. And there's a clear character deficit that the world is operating in. And so that content of character issue that Dr. Cage talked about is very important. We find a lot of people today lack character.
Mark, are you still there? That is something to think about, everybody. It's a real thing. Chip Gibbons, your closing thought. And I just thank you all for being with us today.
When we were talking about the assassination of Malcolm X and the FBI's role in it, one of the questions that came up was, why is this still relevant today? And what I said was that, what's been the impact of this type of government intervention in social movements and political movements, and what does it mean for our democracy? And I was just thinking about how at any point in this country's history when you've had strong movements for workers' rights, for labor rights, for civil rights, you've seen really aggressive and repressive responses from the government. In the early 20th century, you had a very strong socialist party that elected people to Congress and local office. During World War I, the government came in using the Espionage Act and completely decimated and destroyed them. They never got their standing back. During the 30s and 40s, you see a whole bunch of militant movements for labor rights, for civil rights, people connecting the two. You bring in HUAC, McCarthyism, the FBI, those movements are destroyed. And then in the 60s, with the civil rights movement, with the anti-war movement, with the women's movement, you once again see the FBI coming in with COINTELPRO. So in order to really understand where we are today, why we are in such bad shape as progressives, we have to look at how the government deliberately targeted and destroyed those progressive movements, and how every time there was a successful one, whether it was the socialists or the industrial workers of the world or the trade union movements of the 30s, the Black Panthers in the 60s, they come in with a very heavy hand. And our history would be different today if they hadn't done that.
Amen to that. Do you know what? And thank you for bringing that history. You always do that. You and Dwight, that's one of the things that I love about you both. Because people don't realize, unless we study, just how many different movements. I mean, the establishment always tries to tamp down the discussions about people who are more than Democrats and Republicans. Much more than that. It's much deeper than that. People have all kinds of philosophies, whether they admit to them or not. But there were actually parties where that's why you could have the McCarthy hearings, because people actually organized as communists and socialists, et cetera, et cetera. They did. And you know what they organized around? Justice, fairness. Come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, everybody. Let's grow up in our politics and let's start thinking. Let's start thinking and really start working toward creating an America and a world in which everybody can live and breathe free. Our pastor, Reverend Clay Evans, Dwight McKee, said, "I've never seen God make a mouth he could not feed." Poverty is illogical. It's wrong. Because God put everything on this earth that everybody can have plenty. Everybody. He'll satisfy your every need, not your every greed. I've never seen God give you a vision without making provision. That's what Reverend Evans said too. We've got to create a world in which we don't stand in the way of someone's legitimate dreams and ambitions. That's why you need a sound education system, be it academic or vocational, artistic, athletic, whatever your gifts are, you ought to be able to develop them. And stop trying to use people and destroy them in the process when you just abuse their gifts. Think about that, everybody. We can have not just a better world, we can have the right world. We can. We've got to change our thinking. Change our thinking. Change how we do this. So everybody, I love you, Dwight McKee, Chip Gibbons. Thank you so much for being with us today. You all were just great, 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 great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to keep an eye out for what happens with this case. We're going to keep an eye out for that. So blessings to you, Chip and Dwight. Thank you.
Day.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course, you got a home here. Thank you so much. God bless you, everybody. See you. Thank you, Dylan Altoff. I'll see you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show, everybody. Like and share, like and share. Love you, love you. Bye-bye.